All right, so this lesson is on factoring trinomials, and specifically factoring trinomials where there's a coefficient on the first term. So where you have a number times x squared, or it could be some other letter. It doesn't have to be x. So in my class, we've been factoring trinomials, but the coefficient on the x squared was just 1. So this is a lesson on how to factor a trinomial where the coefficient of x squared is not 1. So if a can't be factored out to make it 1, then we have this method. Now, if I was to just read this method to you, it would be very confusing. So instead of doing that, if you want to pause this and read through it, you can. I'm going to move on to examples, and we'll go through this step by step, and hopefully after 4 or 5 examples, you'll understand how to use these steps. So let's go to the first example. So here's example number 1. So step 1 says, see if there's a common factor. Is there anything we can factor out of this before we start? And the answer is no. So we're going to move to step 2. Step 2 says move and multiply it by c. So we're going to take a, that's the coefficient of x squared, and we're going to move it to the end, and we're going to multiply it times this last term, c. So we're going to multiply 2 times 3, and the 2 is going to go away. So that's going to leave us with x squared plus 5x plus 6. So now we're on to step 3. Step 3 says to factor this trinomial. So we're looking for 2 numbers that multiply to make 6 and add to make 5. So that would be 3 and 2. So this factors to x plus 3 times x plus 2. Now step 4 says divide both of your factors by a. So what does that look like? So what we're going to do is go back to this a value, the coefficient of x squared, and we're going to bring it down here, and we're going to divide each of these by that number. So now we're on the last step, step 5. It says reduce the fractions. So if you can reduce these, which 2 over 2 you can simplify that to 1. And any remaining denominator, so if you're left with a fraction, take the denominator and move it up next to the variable. So this 2 over 2 is going to simplify to 1. So over here, we're just going to have x plus 1. But over here, I'm going to take this 2 and I'm going to move it up next to the x. The 3 is going to stay where it's at. So it's going to leave me with 2x plus 3. And that's our answer. Again, I'm going to do 4 or 5 examples for you. So if you didn't follow that, that's okay. Stick with me. But let's step through this again. So we didn't have anything we could factor out. So we took the coefficient of x squared and we moved it to the end and multiplied it times this last term. So 2 times 3 give us 6. Then we factored this. So x plus 3 times x plus 2. And then we moved this 2, the coefficient of x squared, down here and divided each of these by 2. The 2 over 2 simplified to 1. The 3 over 2, you couldn't simplify that. So I just moved the 2 up next to the x and left the 3 there. So we can check using FOIL. So if we FOIL this, first, outer, inner, last, we should end up back where we started. So let's do that. So first, 2x times x gives me 2x squared. Outer, 2x plus 1 gives me 2x. Inner, 3 times x gives me 3x. And last, 3 times 1 is 3. Combine like terms here, the 2x and the 3x, and we end up with 2x squared plus 5x plus 3, which is what we started with. So we know that our answer is correct. So let's look at another example. The coefficient of n squared to the end and multiply it times 6. So we end up with m squared minus 17m plus 30. So now I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to make positive 13 and add to make negative 17. So to add to a negative and multiply to a positive, I know that both these numbers have to be negative. So negative 15 and negative 2. Those multiply to positive 30 and add to negative 17. So this is going to factor to m minus 15 times m minus 2. So now we're going to move on to step number 4. We're going to divide both of your factors by a. So we're going to take this value, bring it down here, and divide each of these by 5. So the 15 over 5, that's going to simplify to 3. So that's going to just leave me with m minus 3. I can't simplify this fraction, so I'm going to slide this 5 up next to the m. So it's going to give me 5m minus 2, and that's my answer. Again, if you were to FOIL this, you should end up back where you started. It's always a good check. So just to save time, I'm not going to do the FOIL on this. All right, so let's look at another example. So 6 times 4. It's going to give us 24. So we have y squared minus 5y minus 24. Two numbers to multiply to make negative 24 and add to make negative 5. I know they have to have different signs. So I'm thinking negative 8 and positive 3. So y minus 8 times y plus 3. Bring the 6 down. Divide by 6, divide by 6. So these we can both simplify. Simplify these, see what we get. So we end up with y minus, we can divide those by 2, so that would be 4/3, and y plus 1/2. And again, the last step says reduce fractions and move any remaining denominators up next to the variable. So we have denominators here. We want to move those up next to the variables. Move those up there. So the 3 comes up next to the y. So I have 3y minus 4. The 2 comes up next to the y here. So I have 2y plus 1. And that is your final answer. Again, if you want to check it, you can FOIL it. All right. Is there a common factor here? There is not. So we're going to skip step 1. The last example I'm going to do does have a factor that we can bring out. So if you're feeling confident and you want to skip to example 4, go right ahead. So I'm going to multiply 12 times 5. So that gives me c squared plus 11c minus 60. So multiplies to a negative, adds to a positive. So they have different signs. So how about positive 15 and negative 4? That would work, right? So that gives us c plus 15 times c minus 4. All right, so now we're going to bring our 12 down. Bring the 12 down here, divide. Go ahead and simplify these. So these you can divide both of these by 3, right? So that would give us c plus 5/4 times c minus 1/3. Dividing both those by 4. Again, don't leave a fraction here. So bring the denominator up next to the variable. So it's going to give me 4c plus 5 times 3c minus 1. And that's your final answer. All right, one more example, last one. So step 1, see if there's a common factor. So this one does have a common factor. So let's see, what can we factor out of that? How about 4? So let's factor out a 4. So if I divide each of these by 4, what I'm going to end up with is 4 times 5x squared minus 13x minus, whoops, not 8. Yes, I do make mistakes. All right, so that was step 1. Now we're on step 2. Move a to the end and multiply it by c. This is our a, coefficient of x squared. We're going to move it to the end and multiply it times 6, or really negative 6. So just leave this 4 out here. That gives us x squared minus 13x minus 30. So now we're looking for two numbers whose product is negative 30 and whose sum is negative 13. So I know they have to have different signs to have a negative product. So how about negative 15 and positive 2? So again, don't forget about the 4. Bring it along. So I have x minus 15 times x plus 2. Okay, now 4, divide both of your factors by a. So here's our a value, right? So we're going to bring this down here. Divide by 5. Divide by 5. Go ahead and simplify this. That simplifies to 3. This one we can't simplify, so I'm just going to slide the 5 up next to the x. So what I'm going to end up with, and again, don't forget this 4. It's a really common mistake for people to forget a 4 here. So x minus 3 times 5x plus 2. And that's your final answer. All right, so I hope you found this video helpful and useful. Until next time.